Hi, and welcome to my Inner Circle podcast. I'm really excited today because we've got a very, very special guest, and she's calling in all the way from England. So I'm glad we have the internet to be our arbiter here. Joanna Penn is a mega best-selling author. She has many, many titles, many of which are in the thriller category, so that's why I like to read them. And we're really lucky to have her today because not only is she a best-selling author, but she's also a self-published best-selling author, and she's done a lot of nonfiction writing and is looked to as very much sort of an expert and a guide for new authors that are trying to find their way going the indie route. And so I'm really excited to have her on the show to talk about both the creative process, but also the sort of her business thinking that goes on behind the scenes. So Joanna, thanks so much for joining.
Oh, no worries. I'm always happy to talk about creative things and entrepreneurial things. So thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Maybe could you start by just telling us a little bit more about your background?
Yeah, sure. So for any cubicle slaves out there, I spent 13 years working as a business consultant in large corporates across Europe and Asia Pacific. So I did my stint implementing accounts payable into big companies. You can't think of anything less creative and more boring. So I did that, but obviously, and essentially I was never happy doing that. So I had my own business after a while. I was a contractor. You know, from the entrepreneurial standpoint, I wasn't happy being like a wage slave. So I was, contractor. So I had that side. I started a scuba diving business in New Zealand. I started property investment before the crash, which was great. Lost loads of money doing that. So I've made some really good business mistakes over the years, and I also have a master's degree in theology from Oxford, so that kind of gives me a different side, and that comes through very much into my fiction. So I kind of write sort of supernatural / religious fiction, a bit like Dan Brown. But yeah, so that's kind of a bit about my background. I've been full-time author entrepreneur now for 3 years, and yeah, just kind of done my 200th podcast episode this week. So like you,
congratulations!
I know, it's kind of crazy, but been doing this stuff online now for about 6 years, and writing fiction for 3. And so I'm certainly, all I would say is I'm a couple of steps ahead on a journey for some people, but I'm learning this stuff every day, and you know how fast stuff changes. So
yep, that's part of the fun. Absolutely. Hey, maybe we can actually start. So you said you made the transition to full-time sort of author entrepreneur about 3 years ago. What was that moment like?
Well, I think you have to make a decision at some point. So I'm absolutely open and honest about this. When I left my day job, I was earning substantially high money, really good money, after 13 years as...
I mean, I hope so, if you're implementing accounts payable.
Yeah, I mean, I was making very good money, and I am still, after 3 years full-time, I'm still only about half the way back to where that was. So, but I think if you look at 13 years versus 3 years, I absolutely will expect to get back to that within a couple of years. So in bringing that up, because your audience are entrepreneurs as well, the point is that if you spend years climbing a ladder, and then you realize it's the wrong ladder, and you have to start again at the bottom, you have to make some life choices. So for me, making the decision to give up that job for good and not just go part-time, I mean, I was so miserable at that point. I was kind of crying at work because I hated it. And I was part-time with the creative pen, with my books, and I just knew if I had more time, I could ramp things up. So there was, financially, what we did is we actually sold everything. So we were living in a 4-bedroom house, we had a car, we had all of that. And what I said to my husband was, if we downsize everything, I will be free to do this. And so basically that's what we did. So when you ask how was that change, we put stuff in place so that I could do this. And I made the decision that I actually didn't, who really wants a house and a car? Nobody.
Yeah.
You know, I'm more millennial, you know, more your age.
Oh, then assets or liabilities, right?
I'm actually only like 25 or something. But so it was a really big decision. And the other thing I would say is the self-esteem. You know, I'm emphasizing the difficult stuff. The self-esteem aspect of going from the top of a ladder to the bottom of a ladder was also difficult, especially as you know, when you do stuff on the internet, nobody understands what you do, and your parents tell you to get a proper job, and like no one understands why you're doing this stuff, and people read your books and then think you're crazy. So it was a very difficult shift, but I would also say it's the best thing I ever did, and I love every day of my life. I have a brilliant life. I just write stuff and sell stuff and speak internationally and talk to people like you, and so it was a brilliant decision, and I haven't gone back, thankfully.
And let's hope you don't have to.
Well, the thing is, I won't, and I can't at this point. I am totally unemployable.
I've always thought of entrepreneurship as an allergic reaction more than anything else.
And it's funny. I used to think that anyone could do this. But I'm actually at the point of thinking that you have to have an underlying independence, I guess, and a kind of longing for freedom where you don't like people telling you what to do. And if you're happy being told what to do, then great. You know, like my husband, he's happy he doesn't want to run his own business because there's so much you have to do. So I do think there is a personality type that suits entrepreneurship.
And what on the entrepreneurial side, what does publishing have to do? Like, what are the similarities between publishing and running a scuba diving business?
Thankfully, not very much.
You don't have to wear oxygen tanks or.
It's really easy. I can just do it like wearing whatever I'm wearing. No, I'll tell you what that experience taught me. So if you think about running a scuba diving business, one, you have to have a boat. So going back to like owning a house and having a vehicle, you have to have a boat. You have to have this was at some islands, you know, you could be on a lake or something, but you know, you have to have gear, you have to have people working for you, you have to be located in one physical location, you are at the beck and call of people all the time. And that whole experience taught me that I don't want to be physically located in one place. I want the freedom to work on my own stuff whenever I want. I don't want to be at the mercy of the weather, or doing a dangerous situation where people can die, you know, with incredibly high startup costs and running costs with very low margins. Now compare that to what I do now. So I write, you know, I've just finished the first draft of my next novel, which is called Gates of Hell.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And you know, that book, so it's taken me, you know, a month or so to get to this point. My time and a laptop and some coffee. I get a cover designed, I get an editor, I put it up on Amazon. The financial input is tiny, you know, it's editing and cover design, and the potential profit margin is incredibly high because if you publish direct, it's a 70% royalty if you go direct on Amazon and Kobo and iBooks and all these places. And there's no one's going to die, you know, there's no massive overhead. I mean, the internet is just stunning. You know, I'm selling books in 58 countries, you know, people enjoy them, and wow. But I think the main thing is for people to consider is what type of life do you want? So if you want a life that's tied down to stuff and physical location, then you might want to do something differently to how I run my life. But for me, that was my aim. So that helps me make decisions every day, basically.
So you brought up a really interesting point, is that you know, if you're writing your own material and you're hiring your own freelancers, it doesn't take a huge amount of financial investment to put a book out there these days, right? And so maybe you can talk a little bit about how you've self-published, and then maybe how you view the role that publishers play. And you know, I was actually I actually saw we mentioned Cory Doctorow before starting the podcast when we were talking. I actually saw him speak last night, and when asked about self-publishing, you know, he said that he's very happy working with his traditional publisher because they sort of he's happy to give away the margin on the contract because they handle all this stuff he doesn't want to deal with, right? And I found that really interesting because he's generally very technologically and internet savvy, but this is, you know, like a piece where he's very happy to give, you know, to have that service provided for him. So can you talk a little bit about your experience as a self-published author, what that means for you, and then I assume you may have friends that are also traditionally published, and maybe anything you've observed about those dynamics.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You mentioned someone like Corey, who's been in publishing a while. So any author who got to a point of market penetration before the influx of Kindle, and Corey would be someone who, you know, I read his books, I love him, I've seen him speak too. Anyone who built a career a little bit earlier and has done well, most of those people are very happy. You know, why would they give up having someone do it all for them when things are working? It's great. The people who are unhappy with traditional publishing are mainly the people who are not selling well and haven't necessarily built up an audience. Now, Corey is, I mean, he speaks all the time. I mean, you could say I mean, it's partly marketing for his books. A lot of, you know, I read his books because of his speaking on, you know, DRM. I mean, you know, you find out about people. So he actually has a marketing angle pretty well down. He also does a lot of stuff, like you say, for tech stuff. His life, if you think about, we've got X amount of energy and hours in the day, how are you going to allot those parts into your life? You can clearly see how his life could do without the publishing aspect.
Sure.
So he's essentially outsourcing that in exchange for money. The money that he doesn't get paid. You know, he didn't pay them, but he is paying them really because he's not getting paid. So take someone like me. So I am a professional speaker as well. But for me, I'm not at a point right now where I want to outsource my publishing to a publisher, which is the way I think entrepreneurs should look at it. And also I think there's a power imbalance. Now, when it's not an if, when I get to a point as a self-published author where the publishers come to me and offer me very good deals, then I may well take some. But I think the problem is that the best thing to do is to learn how the business works. So you know, you can publish an ebook on Kindle. You know, you've done it. It's, you know, it's not difficult. You upload a file, you get a cover designed, you get the format, you upload it. Not a problem. What is a problem? No, it's not a problem. That's the easy bit. But then you realize then nobody cares. Nobody cares about you or your book. You know, you sell a couple of 100 copies and then you're like, oh, what happens now? So, and that happens if you have a publisher too. So what is the real challenge in this whole thing is learning marketing, learning the specifics of book marketing, as well as, you know, the entrepreneurial side of marketing, and then deciding what you want to do with your life and making those choices. So there are plenty of authors who are just going, do you know what? I don't even want to know about marketing, so I'm going to stop being an author altogether. Or I'm sure you know entrepreneurs who just go, I hate pitching, I'm just not going to do this. And that's fine. That's just the way it goes. If there probably isn't anybody listening to your show who isn't an entrepreneur, but some authors just want to write a story and give it to somebody, and they want to be told, you're great, you know, well done, pat on the head, we love you. Doesn't matter if they don't sell any books. That's, you know, it's the validation reason for publishing. So, or maybe you're a massive speaker. Plenty of big bloggers and speakers who use a publisher because the book is just a business card. My business model is based on making money from books. So therefore, I work in the way that I do to facilitate that. So I know that's quite a long answer, but it's just about your business model and how you want to run those kind of energy units of your life.
No, that makes complete sense. You know, I feel like any entrepreneur's most limited resource is hours in the day, right? So figuring out how you're going to balance that is unbelievably important. Now, maybe we can actually dive down a little deeper into that answer. given that your business model is to actually sell books, let's focus on that first, because for some authors, as you said, really they're making money off consulting or speaking gigs, and that's a very different calculation. But for those who actually want to sell books, marketing is sometimes a touchy subject, but it's funny because it's a touchy subject that every author has to wrestle with regardless of their publishing path. And as you said, once a book, the easy part is getting the book published in a way, right? Like once it's there, how do you build that audience? Or many people say, how do you build that platform, right? Are there any lessons you learned through that process? Are there any mistakes that you see first-timers making, or things you wish you could have told yourself when you were starting out?
Well, I do two things as well. I'm kind of two people. I write fiction under J.F. Penn, which is dark, thriller, supernatural thriller stuff, and then I write non-fiction as Joanna Penn. And what I have a big learning is you market them differently. So non-fiction, you can apply all the rules you apply to any entrepreneurial startup. You can do blogging, you can be on social media, you can do all of the standardy kind of stuff works for non-fiction. SEO, book titles, it's much easier. Like I have a book called How to Market a Book, right? It comes up #1 in Amazon if you type in how to market a book, because I did keyword research and discovered that was a good idea. I have another book called Career Change, and originally it was called How to Enjoy Your Job, which just is a terrible title. When I renamed it Career Change, again based on SEO, it sells 10 times as many books.
And okay, so it recently discoverability has sort of come up as this like hot topic within sort of like book marketing circles or publishing circles. Maybe we can take it from that angle, right? Like why is that a better title? Like from the reader psychology perspective. So
it's not even psychology. It's the fact that Amazon is like the #1 or #2 search engine on any. Well, it's the #1 search engine for buying stuff. Google and YouTube would be up there for finding out things, but buying stuff, Amazon's search engine is very key. And people should do their research there you can just go and start typing stuff in, and it will automatically drop down stuff. And then you can use that to help you. If your keywords don't drop down, then nobody's searching for that stuff. So for non-fiction, like that is crucial. The discoverability of a keyword, book title, and keyword optimized metadata, being in the right category, all of those types of things are really important. But then also, I have my blog at thecreativepen.com, and I've been blogging there. I have a podcast, I have a YouTube channel, just like you, just like lots of us. And I talk about the topics that go into my book. So I have one on book marketing, and I blog about that. I have one on public speaking for introverts, which I also talk about. So I have all of these types of things that relate to my platform: blogging, podcasting, social media. That sells those books. Fiction, I have discovered, is actually, one might say, harder, and yet also easier. So harder in that it's blooming hard to build up a fiction audience, because you can't use SEO. Like, you don't use SEO titles for fiction. You have to choose the right categories, but what you then find is that the categories are full of really famous authors. And then you use promotional things like BookBub, which can boost you up the lists for a bit, and that spikes you up, and then you go down again. So for fiction, the two keys are: 1, write more books, and 2, build an email list. So for fiction, those are kind of the two big things. Obviously, write a good book, have a good book cover, use the right metadata, all of that as well. But I found, like, blogging for fiction, not a big deal. YouTube for fiction, it works for John Green, but most people it doesn't. It's a very blog tours. Nobody really does anymore. So most fiction authors who are making money from their fiction, like good money, like thousands and thousands a month, are mainly basing it on volume, and email lists based on growing an audience, and that takes a long time. You know, like you've got one book up at the moment. One book is blooming hard to market with fiction. What you really need is at least 2 books or 3 books, and then you put the first book on a promotional cycle, which brings people into your list, and then hopefully they buy the other books at higher prices because they like you. But
my next book comes out in a month.
Yeah, exactly. So when, and actually, what, you know, generally you will find it easier at 3. Like 2 is brilliant, like well done you. 3 is much easier because also then you can do a box set. You can start, you know, you just get more choice. You can put them all at different price points. You can play with things. You can actually see results more easily. One book is not a, you know, it doesn't really tell you anything. So, and also I think for you as an author, you will understand more about you the more books you write. So I've started to write much darker. My writing gets darker all the time. Like I'm really influenced by Stephen King, and I think I'm finding my voice. And this is my 6th novel, full length, and I've got novellas and short stories as well. So this is, I'm getting into my stride now, so I hope that encourages you.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's wonderful. So one follow-up would be, you know, I guess for those listeners who don't know that much about publishing or about sort of like author entrepreneurship, one of the reasons why email lists are seen as being really important is because, I mean, even for very simple things, if you're reading a series of books and the next book comes out, how do you even know, right? Like, how do you know that it's available? And, unless the author is buying ads that are somehow targeted to you, you won't know unless you somehow remember the book and go on Amazon and see if there's another one out, right? So one of the big reasons why authors want to build their email list is so that they can actually keep in touch with fans, right? So that you can actually have an open door in terms of communication with the people who like what you're writing. But maybe we can focus on that just for a moment more. Besides letting people know when a new book is out, what do you use your fiction mailing list for? Like, what do your readers want to hear from you?
Well, I don't know what they want to hear, but what I tell them is another thing. So we all struggle with this as well. This is really difficult. What I've done is, and I have 2 lists, so I have my non-fiction list, my fiction list. What I now do is an HTML formatted newsletter once a month, which has got a nice banner. So for brand management, it's got my brooding fiction author photo, and then what I do is I include more personal information about me that involves generally my research. So for example, you know, I went to Barcelona to do some research, and I will take pictures of me in Barcelona. I'm with my husband. I don't share pictures of him, but I'll share more personal pictures of me doing researchy stuff. So that's like that gives them more of a connection to me as a person. So that's one thing I always put in, is something like that. Secondly, I generally do some kind of giveaway. So it's Halloween right now, so I've got a giveaway with an anthology and a first edition of a book of mine, Desecration, in its first edition cover, which basically isn't available anymore, so it's quite a good one. So I do a giveaway. Then I do author interviews on my. I do have a fiction blog, but I use it for not content for SEO. I use it for content for my newsletter. So I have one interview with another author who I think they might like. And that serves the purpose of something to put in the newsletter, but also a relationship with the author. So I only interview people whose books are similar to mine, in the hope that they will also share the interview and there's some reciprocity going on. And then I also have a book recommendation of a fiction book I've been reading that month, so whatever it is. But again, it will resonate with the type of thing I think my audience will like. So that's 4 things I do every time, once a month. So I have a regular schedule. It goes out on, you know, same day every month. And then in between times, I will send generally one extra email a month, which will say if there's a new book out on that day, or like I'm in a box set called Dark Trinity for Halloween again, so that will go out as a separate email. And then the other thing I have, which is something a lot of fiction authors do, is something called a street team. Have you heard that?
No, I haven't.
Okay, this is an advanced tactic. So the so-called street team are your super fans. They're the people who will actually do reviews for you when you ask them. So one of the big things for Amazon, Amazon owns Goodreads. Did you know that? Yeah. So it's really important to get data points against your book. And by that we mean reviews on Amazon or Goodreads. So what you do with your street team is you generally give them free copies before the book's out, and they will post reviews within the first week, which will help you get visibility in the algorithms, help you get social proof. And so I actually just email with them. I have a spreadsheet, and I only have like 50 of those people, and I kind of cull that list to make sure that they're active and they do stuff, and I have more of a relationship with them, and I know a bit about them, and they send me pictures of their dogs and stuff, and so that's a different type of relationship, and every couple of months I'll find more people for that list. But so that's slightly different. Does that all make sense?
Absolutely. No, I do the same thing. I just never use the same term.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, that's great. So because you write both fiction and nonfiction, you actually write your fiction under a fairly transparent pen name. Do you see much crossover? Do you get people who get introduced to you via your nonfiction blog or listen to your podcast who then end up loving your thriller stories, or vice versa? Or is it really a soup and everyone is, you have many.
Very few crossover. I would probably 5% of my creative pen audience crossed over, which is why it's very important for people to decide who do they want to attract. If you blog about writing and publishing, you'll attract authors, and an author. Well, let's face it, like your book and my book. So I like the look of your book because you mentioned Lara Croft. So do I. I mean, I mentioned Lara Croft too. I say I'm Dan Brown meets Lara Croft, and you're kind of suggesting the tech Lara Croft, right? So that, and I like techno thrillers, but I totally get that probably my audience are not necessarily going to like your book because I'm an entrepreneur. They are not generally. So that's an interesting thing. So your kind of site with the with the entrepreneurial slant on it, writing about technology, for example, that probably will attract similar people to who might like your book. But if you suddenly wanted to write something that wasn't tech related in your fiction, there probably wouldn't be crossover. But remember, I have 2 business models. You can see your cute dog over there.
Come on. Yeah, she's a little puppy. So.
She's in the box.
You want to come say hi to Joanna? Here you go.
Oh, look. Oh, hello.
Yeah.
If you started to write dog fiction,
Yeah, exactly. Right.
No, you'll probably do really well with that,
Great covers.
Yeah, everyone loves dogs, right? But I can't remember what we were talking about now.
Sorry.
I'm sure it doesn't matter.
You were saying, like my blog focuses on entrepreneurship and technology, and my writing, because it's a thriller that includes some of those themes, there could be crossover. But if I started writing historical romance, there might not be so much crossover.
Yeah. So, but the point is that I actually have 2 business models, and this is what people have to consider. Where is the income coming from? So JF Penn only makes money from ebooks, print books, and audiobooks. That's how JF Penn makes money. The Creative Pen makes money from the sale of ebooks, print books, audiobooks, but also multimedia courses, professional speaking. I have sponsorship for my podcast. I have affiliate sales from traffic. So I have a business model for that website that doesn't relate to my thrillers. And I only started writing thrillers a couple of years after starting the Creative Pen. So that was how, and this is also how do you grow and getting to know yourself and finding your voice. Everybody changes, right? Everybody moves on. So what you have to do is just, make sure that what you build is going to take you to where you want to get to.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So we've talked quite a bit about the business process. So one question I'd have for you is I have a publisher. So my publisher is FG Press, and they're actually a venture-backed new publishing company based in Boulder, Colorado. And I was lucky enough to have Uncommon Stock be their lead title. And since then, they've been releasing about one book a month. Most of them are business or entrepreneurship-focused books. And they started the company because the founders and the investors behind it were authors who were really frustrated with working with traditional publishers. Said at the beginning of the conversation that as you grow your audience and your platform and both sides of your writing business, that in the future, if you were offered a deal that you liked, you would, you at least consider it, right? Which I think most authors would. Why wouldn't you? What if you could design the perfect publisher? What would that look like?
Well, I mean, it has happened to a couple of big name authors now. I think all of us would do a print deal, so a print only deal. Absolutely. You can take my print rights tomorrow. I don't even need an advance. I just take a royalty split on a print only deal. I want my ebook rights absolutely in English. I have done a deal for German, so I'll pretty much sell. I have a foreign rights agent to sell my foreign rights. I believe that it's just impossible to do well, it's not impossible. I currently self-publish in German, Italian, and Spanish.
Oh,
wow. with Portuguese on the way next year for Brazil. So when I say it's impossible, it's not impossible, but you don't sell very many books because it's very hard to do marketing in those languages when you don't speak those languages. So I've made the decision that I would rather sell my foreign rights than try self-publishing like in Mandarin or something. So that's something I definitely want. Then of course you've got film and multimedia rights. I was at Screenwriters Festival last weekend thinking about adaptation and basically getting the books optioned for meeting producers to get options. That's something else that it's quite, obviously I'm sure any of us would take an option deal as well. And then I also think about gaming, about like Oculus Rift. I'm really excited about Oculus Rift and that side of things. I definitely have my Arcane series could be gamified, definitely. Yeah, exactly. It's Lara Croft in a new dimension, basically, for a new generation, or something like that. But I think it, like you mentioned earlier about Cory Doctorow being happy with what was happening there. We can't do everything ourselves. So the question is, what do you want to outsource? Now, I love the speed of being able to publish digitally. So the fact that when I've had this book edited, I upload it to Amazon, it's for sale within 4 hours, and 60 days later I get paid. You can't do that with a publisher. You just can't. So also audiobooks with acx.com. I don't know if you know about if you know about ACX. I'm starting to get great money from ACX, and that's collaborating with a narrator on the audiobooks, and that's another income stream. So I'm actually at the moment pretty keen to keep my audio rights in English. I have just got a German narrator, but if you think about rights, and this is a big deal for people, you don't just have one book. You have a product which you can license multiple times in all these different ways. So you definitely, ebook rights in English, I would like to keep. Everything else is negotiable.
Makes sense. Okay, so what like now that you've been at it for quite a while, both in nonfiction, in fiction, and in publishing, what's something that you believe about either publishing or storytelling, like in terms of craft? that you really believe, but that almost everyone else disagrees with?
I think probably that, I am still part of a fringe movement, which is the author as entrepreneur. This is a very new idea, and most people do not believe that authors should be entrepreneurs or can be entrepreneurs. So and also that self-publishing, and I don't call myself a self-publisher, I call myself an indie author, an independent author, because I employ as contractors 11 people. So, I'm not doing this by myself. So I think my kind of other thing, which is self-publishing and being an indie author, is far more rewarding than, as a creative business than, a lot of other things. And also that you don't need a publisher to tell you that you're worth something. You only need the readers to tell you that. So I actually think these things are not rocket science for my direct kind of friends and authors, probably like yourself as well, but for the wider author population, the wider publishing population, we are still anomalies, and I get a lot of confusion and a lot of kind of flack for saying the things I say, and people are like, oh, it's not about the money and blah blah blah, and it's whatever. If you can run a creative business and make a decent living, like, what's the problem with that?
Absolutely. So, okay, so, you mentioned that readers sort of are the arbiters of success rather than sort of gatekeepers standing between creators and readers. As a reader, what are some of the best books you've read recently? Oh,
I'm a huge reader. We don't have a TV, so although we download, yeah, I think it's more common. Again, I'm so millennial.
Yeah, exactly.
We download stuff, but mainly I read an awful lot. I have actually just finished. I've been rereading Stephen King's It.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like he wrote it in the 80s, and it's very, very long. It's like a George R.R. Martin thing. Really enjoyed that, and it took quite a long time to read. And what's interesting is the dedication in the front is to his children, and his son at the time, Joe, is 11, and his son is now the horror writer Joe Hill, whose film Horns is out at the moment. So it's really cool. It's cool on two kind of levels. One is that this kind of time travel aspect of reading a book that he wrote when his son was that young. And the second thing is the penny. This is something really important for authors, and the penny dropped for me on this. Fiction doesn't age. He wrote that in 1982 or something, and I'm reading it now in 2014, loving it. You could read it in another 20 years' time, and it would still stand as a story. Sure, they don't have cell phones and stuff, but whatever. And that's so critical, because I found, like, I have 3 non-fiction books that aren't even for sale anymore, because rather than rewrite them, I just took them off the market, because I was like, do you know what? I don't even want to rewrite those, because things change with non-fiction, especially anything related to tech. It changes, so you have to rewrite the damn book, like, especially on Facebook. Anyone who writes a book on Facebook is ridiculous, because they change the rules every 5 minutes. So fiction doesn't age. That's a good thing. And then I read a lot of non-fiction too. So I just read Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. Yeah, which is obviously an entrepreneurial book. I read a lot of business books. And yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts as well. And, like, I'm sure you do as well. I like to stay up on this, but I like the darker thrillers, action adventure, and business books. They're kind of the main books I read.
Oh, okay. Well, have you read Creativity Inc. and The Hard Thing About Hard Things?
Yes, I haven't read The Hard Thing About Hard Things yet. I downloaded the sample, and I just didn't. Do you recommend that? Because it didn't gel with me.
It's different. It's definitely like a different kind of story than most nonfiction books are. It took a while to get into, but I
yeah, that may be the problem. Like, I download samples of so many things, and if I don't, I generally give things a couple of clicks, and if I don't get into them, you know, they're gone.
Yeah, for sure. Have you read Jeff Vandermeer?
Oh yeah, it's the nice
The trilogy.
Wonder Book.
Yeah. And he
Wonder
wrote
Book.
all 3 books this year. The first one I think is called, is it Authority? It's like Authority. Let me check.
We have the internet.
We do it. We have the internet, right? And I have it on. Yeah, Authority is the second one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll put it in the show notes. But I think if you haven't read them, I think you'd really enjoy them, especially because your thrillers are getting darker and darker.
Yeah.
It's super weird, and it's really cool. It's just like you almost feel like surreality invading your own brain as you're going through the story. They're really fun.
Oh no, that sounds good. No, it's great. I love to find new authors, and it's interesting. So I just see that you've got Brad Feld on your site as well. I really enjoyed his book with his wife Amy about whatever that was called, their life.
Startup Life.
Yeah, Startup Life. I thought that was brilliant.
So that's actually an interesting story. So Brad was actually the first reader of Uncommon Stock.
No.
He was super encouraging. I mean, he was the first reader and sort of my biggest supporter for writing the whole book. And FG Press, my publisher, is his new publishing company.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah,
that's great. Because I really felt with that book, because my husband and I, we choose to be child-free as well, like Brad and Amy, and I really found that very good of them to talk about that and the way they run their marriage, because as somebody who, you know, relationships with entrepreneurs can be very difficult. Relationships with authors can be difficult.
Doubly difficult.
Yeah. I'm just going to sit here and, like, don't interrupt me for, you know, while I just write for hours. And you can be, like, my idea of a romantic weekend, I took my husband to Budapest, and I did take him shooting down in the Soviet bunkers, you know, AK-47 and stuff. Then I took him to the torture museum for the, you know, the Nazis, and then we went to the mass grave at the synagogue, and I'm like, this is all book research, very important. You know, so I think it's great to look at that side of things, the emotional side, because how you run your life emotionally impacts so much on the business side, your creative side, and I very much believe in keeping the drama on the page, you know, rather than in the emotional life. So I would recommend that book too, and you can you'll find the title, won't you, Brad and Amy's book?
Oh yeah, Startup Life. Yeah, and I'll include that in the show notes, and I'll definitely mention to Brad that you enjoyed it.
Please do. I would love that. I'm a real fan.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's sort of interesting because that what you mentioned, sort of his book is about. Startup Life is very much about how to manage your personal life and your emotional life and your relationships as an entrepreneur and with an entrepreneur, right? When I wrote Uncommon Stock, it was almost the reverse. Like because I worked in startups for a long time, and there's an enormous amount of nonfiction about entrepreneurship, as you obviously know and read a lot of. And there's a bunch of fantastic stuff, and there's a bunch of crap, right? But it could fill a major library on its own. But what I sort of missed is that, like, being an early employee and a founder in a startup, like, there is a lot of drama. Like, and it's stuff you have to work through, and it's stuff you try to minimize over time, as you said, right? But the human element of being a business builder is really deep, and a lot of the nonfiction out there, and with Brad's book, Startup Life, as an exception, as a real and deep exception, doesn't touch on it so much, right? It's like, here are the top 10 things I learned by, I don't know, IPOing this company.
and you'll find a lot of them are divorced, basically.
Yeah, true. Yeah, you're right.
But it is, these things are important. And I mean, as an author, I had this conversation with my husband. Honey, I'm giving up my very well-paid job to write books. I mean, most people, don't have that kind of conversation, or at least, I'm very lucky in that he's very supportive. But I was married. This has gone a completely different direction. But I was married before. This is actually my second marriage, and my first marriage split up over that. For many reasons, but that scuba diving business I mentioned was like the stress of running that business broke us up, and we wanted different things. So and also this, like you said about you have to determine what you want emotionally. So again, I'm an introvert. I don't like noise. So working in a massive open plan noisy place was never going to work for me. I don't like conflict with face to face. That's what writing's for. So doing that kind of drama in an office, I just hated it. It just exhausted me and drained me. And so you have to think about how your work environment feeds your soul and your emotional side and your energy, and you have to manage that. I mean, life is very short, and if you don't decide what you want out of your life, and you don't take control and say no to the things that you don't want, then it's great. So yeah, and I choose not to have employees. I choose not. Well, I'm the only employee of my company, and the director and the shareholder. And what's so great about being an author is it's a scalable business model with very little overhead, as we said, and you make more money as time goes by because you have more and more products. So, but the first few years are very hard, like any startup. So I actually think more startup-y people will probably get into writing books as they realize what it entails.
Absolutely. No, I think that's great. Okay, so one last question. What's the most important question I'm not asking?
Yeah. I don't know. It would depend on what you wanted to talk about. I can't really think about. I think we've talked about everything really. For me, the most important thing is that decision on what you want for your whole life. And I think that most people gloss over that and go straight. Like as in, it's not. I want to make $1 million. That's not the right answer. That isn't the thing. You've got to think about where you want to live and who you want to do it with and what you want to do, and also think about that body of work. So I've got all these things on my wall, but one of them is what can I do towards my body of work today? So thinking about whether I'm right. I got my my calendar for you to show you. I'll just show you. Can you see my stickers?
Oh, cool, yeah.
So this is my word count calendar. So, and I give myself stickers and things when I do well. That directly relates to my body of work every day. So, yeah, I think these are the big questions that you've got to ask yourself, and also being brutally honest and just going, do you know what? Does this serve me does this serve my goals in any way? But also, and still along those lines, being generous and helpful as well, which I think is part of our internet community that is so important. And I find, for example, meeting you, this has been great. I really enjoyed this, and I love the connections that we can make online. And I mean, I could have gone, well, I don't know how going on this thing will serve my body of work, but that that's a different thing too. It's kind of reaching out and making connections is important as well. So yeah, I think we've had a bit of a theme around what's important in your life. We've got quite deep and meaningful, haven't we? We have, yeah. Well, speaking of generosity and helpfulness, I deeply appreciate you making the time to talk. This has been really insightful, and I really appreciate it. Oh no, I really enjoyed talking to you, and I've just downloaded your book, so I look forward to reading that. Awesome! Yeah, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on it. I like techno thrillers. Perfect. Okay, very cool, very cool. And I can't wait to dive into your darker Lara Croft adventures. So, for our listeners, where can they find you and your books online? Sure. So on Amazon and Kobo and Nook and all that, I'm Joanna Penn for my non-fiction and JF Penn for my fiction, and that's F for Francis. And I'm at thecreativepenn.com, pen with a double N, for my podcast, and there's loads of free information there, and jfpenn.com for my fiction. Or I'm on Twitter at thecreativepenn with a double N.
Perfect. And just for any aspiring authors or author entrepreneurs out there, Joanna's podcast and blog about being a writer and entrepreneurship is one of the best resources I could ever recommend to anyone looking into it. So definitely check it out.
Thanks so much, Elliot. You're very sweet.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks so much, and we'll have to talk soon. Bye bye.
Okay.